Okay, so hello everyone. Um, I would say we just maybe start, maybe some people will join us. I think there's some people missing. But also one or two people said they will not be able to make it, so we will not be all of us today. I hope you have had a great start to the week. Today we're continuing exploring the Dorico software. And we'll talk a little bit about some instrument-specific notations. And then in the second part, after a small break, we will look at what you sent me. Thanks for all your homework. And just have a look, try to correct some things maybe, see if you understood everything. And yeah, go a little more in detail in that, so you're always kind of on the right track. So today we'll talk a little bit more about the ride mode, and we will talk about the jump bar. I will tell you what it is because it's very handy. I didn't talk about it last time, I think, and about transposition views. And then we were going a little bit about talking about some instruments and talking about how they are also a little smarter in Dorico. And this is why I like it so much. And yeah. Without further ado, let's just get right in. I will just make sure I have the chat open as well. Let's open Dorico. I need to share again, I think. Let's just start a new project. You cannot see my Dorico right now, right?
Yes, we are. We see it.
You can see it?
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, let's just talk shortly about two more things that I wanted to show you, and for that we're just going to add. Oh no, let's open this one once more. Yes. So that was too early. One thing I wanted to show you is the transposing views. And of course, you know that some instruments, they are written in a different pitch than they are actually sounding. Usually that is affecting wind instruments and brass instruments. So for example, you can see the horn, the clarinet, the clarinets, the horns, and the trumpet, they have written in something. And this is the way they are tuned, meaning that a written C is not necessarily sounding as a C. And in Dorico, I have multiple, I can actually show it in different ways. Um, I can have a score like this, where actually everything is as it sounds. So I, for example, now see that here the key of the clarinet is the same, but this was not the same as the clarinet will actually read the music. So if I go to the clarinet part, you can see they only have two flats, and they start with a written D. So let's go back to the full score. Here we can see the first clarinet starts with a C. Now, by default, the parts in Dorico are transposing, of course, because the instrumentalists, when they play from this part, they need to play it in the transposing view. Um, while the score, I actually don't know what the default is. I think it's concert pitch, but you can change it very easily here. Um, in the bottom corner, and there's two small things, and you can see that if I change it, the pitches actually also change. So the clarinets, they have now two flats when I go to transpose pitch, and they will start with a D. Now it will sound the same as before, but I will just now see what the players are seeing when they are um, performing the music, which is of course especially important for instruments like horns and clarinets when you arrange, because you want to actually know what the player is seeing when you arrange. For this, I can make a short example with a new document. Sit back here, and let's add saxophones. Let's add. Do I not have like a ensemble? It doesn't matter. So an alto. Oops. Can, by the way, also of course add it with shortcuts, a tenor saxophone, and the baritone saxophone. So why are instruments actually transposing? It's because so players can easily switch between different types of instruments. So for example, in the saxophones, there's like soprano saxophone, tenor saxophone, baritone saxophone, etc. If I add a key signature such as D major, you can see that if it's this whole thing is in concert pitch, all of them have the same keys. But if they, and I can also try to enter all for all the same notes. Let's choose this C. Yeah, so all of them would play the same note. It would sound the same. But if I go to transposed pitch, you can see that all of that actually looks different. And I should be able to hear something. Let me just make sure I have the right line. Just make sure. Just one moment. Yeah, this is also correct. Share sound. No. Yes. Louder. Yes. Okay. Now you hear it too. So you can see that here that it's all the same. It's the same pitch, but to perform the same pitch on the different instruments, because they have different sizes, you need to play different fingerings. On the other hand, if all of them would play the same fingering, you can see that it would actually sound different. So the alto saxophone, if you give a saxophonist a saxophone and they would play this A, they could use the same combination of fingers, go to the tenor saxophone. They would also play what they read as an A, but it would sound different. Uh, should be a fifth. Um, and then if you go to the baritone saxophone, because it's tuned in E flat again, you have the same note with the same combination of fingers, but an octave lower. And so this makes it easier for the instrumentalist to actually play different instruments if they play the saxophone, because if they read this note, they always need to play the same fingerings, and then the transposition happens automatically. The same happens for trumpets and horns and clarinets. Clarinets, there's like C, B clarinet, A clarinet. Trumpets, there's F trumpet, C trumpet, B trumpet, E flat trumpet. Horns, there's nowadays usually F and B, but there's historically a lot of different tunings. Saxophones have B and E flat. And so you can see that this is very important. But in order for me as an arranger to know what it means, if I go back to this dip. Yeah. So if I would see the concert pitch, I would think, oh, they all play the same note. But if I am in the transposed pitch, I can see that for the alto saxophone, it's a rather low note. For the tenor saxophone, a little higher. And for the baritone saxophone, it's already a really high note. So this might be harder to play on a baritone saxophone than alto saxophone. And so I recommend always for you to use, if you're using transposing instruments, use also the transposed pitch view, because in this case, it's much easier for you to estimate how hard it is for your instrumentalists to play. So this is just something I wanted to show you, and this is very important. You really have to make it playable for the player, and thus you need to see what the player sees when you're arranging. I can actually go, where is my, here, continue band. So way down. So in this wind quintet, you can see that there's a lot of different instruments: English horn, clarinet in B, alto saxophone, bassoon, bass clarinet. Only the bassoon is actually in sounding pitch. If I now switch to transposed pitch, it's easier for me to estimate how hard it is to play. I can see for the English horn, it's already on the higher register. It also means that, they have maybe a brighter timbre. Um, for the alto saxophone, it's already really high. While for the clarinet, it's rather low, so it's maybe rather dark. So I can already see in this way who will sound louder, who will sound leading, while here I only see the melody. Now, in this case, it was smart for me to make the alto saxophone the melody, and for example, the English horn, the uh, um, the second voice in the clarinet is just a filler because the clarinet in this register is very warm and very fusing sounds of different instruments together. The English horn is somewhat bright, but the alto saxophone is very, very present. Why? Because it actually plays very, very high for its own instrument. So this is like a very loud and leading tone. I mean, saxophone is also very loud on the lower register, but in this register, it's very bright and present. And so in this way, I can better estimate how the balance will be, the timbres will mix, etc. So I always recommend you, if you want to check the notes, if they're correct with the piano, go to concert pitch. But when you start arranging, switch to transposed pitch, view, and arrange like this because it's much easier for you to estimate. For example, this. Okay, in this case, it's actually not too high. What can I show you? Because like this, it's easy to think that things might be playable, but you see that it's actually really getting high, for example, in the saxophone. And so this is just a very, very easy small trick for you. Always try to work in transposed pitch. So you see what the instrumentalists are going to see. Okay, this was a little longer than I wanted, but it's very important. Um, The other thing I want to show you is the jump bar. And the jump bar is a very handy small tool. So I was showing you some or the features of Dorico, and sometimes it's very hard to find the things that you want to find. There's a lot of menus here, things you can do, etc. And sometimes it might be a little overwhelming. But what's actually very helpful is what's called the jump bar. You can activate it if you press J. And there you can just literally search for anything that you want to search, which you can, for example, also find here. So you can, for example, say, I can write dynamic, and then it shows me different options for the dynamic. For example, create dynamic. Then this plops up, and I can say, I want a dynamic of piano, and it changes that. You can also type other things, like, what do I always use? Yeah, for example, you can start slurs, you can filter. This is, I think, very, very handy in general. If you, for example, want to delete a lot of things simultaneously, you can select the whole passage and say filter, for example, dynamics, all dynamics, and you only have them selected and you can delete them. So in this way, you don't have to go here and look for edit. Wait, where was filter? I don't even remember anymore where the filter was. Um, see, I use it so rarely that I actually just here it's filter, yeah. So you can go here and you can look through all these things. but it's much easier. You will find everything that you need in using the jump bar. The other thing in Dorico is that when you use this right click menu, it will only show you the things that you can do, for example, in this moment. So if I select the dynamics, I mostly have stuff for dynamics. If I select a node, I have different options. For example, I can change the node head, which I, of course, cannot do if I select a dynamic. And all these things. I can add fingering, reset fingering, change the voice, all these things. So another small or like smart tip is to use the jump bar and just really type like fingering, create fingering if you don't know. And just like that, you can have a fingering for this node. Okay. So these are two small things I wanted to show you, which are very useful when you start to work more with Dorico. Let's not save this. So let's not save this. And let's start a new project and let's go to special instruments. And for that, we're going to add a harp. So the harp is a very special instrument because the harp can actually only play certain things. The harp has usually 7 strings per octave. And although you can detune the strings, you cannot play, for example, 12 notes simultaneously of the octave, but you are always restricted to 7 notes per octave. And you can change that via pedaling. This also means that, for example, if I write for the harp, yeah, I might be able, I will transpose everything in octave. I might be able to write this, but I cannot, for example, write this. And you can see that Dorico is actually creating red notes. And the red notes are the notes that are different in this moment um, of the pedal status. So in the default pedal status, you can play C major, but in order to play B flat, A flat, and E flat, you need to actually change the pedals. Now there's a function, and again, we can use the jump bar, which is called calculate harp pedals. For this, I can select a note, and I can just enter calculate harp pedals, and you will see this kind of thing appears. But nothing really changed. Now, if I, for example, would just change this note to E flat, then first they both would be red because we are still in the same C major. But if I now calculate harp pedals, you can see that these both notes become black because why? I created a harp pedal where now the E is permanently an E flat, but still because I need an A and a B to turn it to B flat and A flat, I need to recalculate the harp pedals. Now, just for your information, actually, in the harp part, you can see here, we have this thing now. I can also show it in the score if I want, but we will come to that later. And this thing is what harpists use in order to see which pedal settings they need. You can either do it like this, or you can also make it in this diagram. Different harpists prefer different things. Some harpists don't want you to put any of them, so you can also hide it, for example, um, because they want to do it themselves, because usually they are smarter, they know what to do. Um, but what's important for you if you write for the harp is that you are aware that the harp cannot really change pedals, for example, easily. So what you're aware is, okay, if I want the harpist to play this, then I need to, for example, say calculate another harp pedal at this point. You can see now B and A flat are both black, and I can actually play these notes with no problem. But if I go to a B natural again, it will show me again, watch out, the current status of the pedaling is not permitted. Of course, in this kind of passage, it's kind of easy, but if you imagine this would be all, and let's just, oh, wait. Uh, Wait, how for example, like this, and it's a fast tempo, it might be harder. If I do it once more, then this might be actually very, very problematic to change so quickly. Um, Oops, that's not what I wanted. Too late. Especially, for example, if you have this kind of passage, that's kind of impossible to play. Because if I change this note, then this need, and then I have this pedal thing. So yeah, so this is important for you to know if you write for harp, because either in this case, this note will be playable or this note will be playable. Now, the thing about the harp, there's actually a way around. Mostly, if you really want this to be performed, you can write it like this. And you might think, well, this is the same, but it's actually not, because in the harp, the note head usually shows which string should be played. And if I then calculate the harp pedal again, all I need to do is to change the C to a C flat, and I can play this chromatic thing. So in a harp, a C flat is not the same um, as a B natural. Yeah, these two notes are not the same. This one I can play, this one I cannot. So much for that. I hope that's somewhat clear. Um, Mostly it's a good tool for you when you write for the harp, which is of course amazing to write for, to check that what you're writing is playable, especially when you get chords. Then you are actually in need. And then remember, I didn't show you how to write chords. You're actually in need of that. So let's just say this is C flat. Okay, and you want to write a chord now. And you want to write a chord, for example, like this. You can write a chord in different ways. When you have a note, make it E flat. There's something which is called the intervals popover, which is Shift I. Well, and you can just write -3 for a third down, 5 for a fifth up, and you will have this kind of chord. Now, what you can also do is, for example, if you're in note entry mode, there's this button here, which are like stacked chords, and you can activate it via Q for keywords. I don't know. C was already taken. And if now you see the small plus here, and we see the small plus, you can actually just by typing the names, you can add, for example, chords. And when you have chords, sometimes, oops, you might, for example, have such chords. I don't know, it's not a very dissonant chord, of course. And in this case, again, it's not possible to calculate a harp pedal because either you will have a C flat or you will have a C. So both is not possible. You have to think what to do. And so this chord would not be playable like this. You can try to make it like this, and then you can just recalculate the harp pedal, and now it's playable because now we're using B natural and C. So in this way, it's always good for you to see that what you're writing for harp is actually playable. Okay, so much to the harp. Let's go to guitar. Guitar. Let's add just a classical guitar with standard tuning. So have you seen, there are a lot of guitars in Dorico. Really, really a lot. Like basically most of the guitars. But there's of course a lot of guitars which are not there's a lot more guitars in the world than there are in Dorico. And so what is really cool about Dorico, and you can also do it in the free version, just delete them, sorry, is when you click here, you have this instrument in the guitar player, and you can actually edit the strings and the tuning. And so what you can create is your own guitar tuning instrument. You can add things like capo, for example, full capo on the third fret. You will see a line appearing here. You can also make it a partial capo, which is also only going from these to these strings. You can, I will have none for now. You can change the tunings. You have a lot of tuning presets here, but you can also just, for example, change the, wait, how do I delete a string? Just like that. You can, for example, make a 5 string. You can add more strings if you want. You can change on each string the pitch of the open string. And you can also change where it starts, how many frets there are on this string. And you can, of course, do it on all of these strings. Yeah, that's not matching with anything anymore. So you can really do your own guitar and your own presets, and you can also see that which presets are, for example, fitting for this amount of strings. And let's just go back to the normal standard guitar tuning for a moment, because what's actually really amazing about it is how Dorico handles the whole guitar thing. Because it knows all the strings and everything, it's actually very nice and convenient to write for guitar. So let's again just create this, and it's just like this. Now, not every guitar player can actually read music. Some of them use tablature, which is again totally fine, because in Dorico you can change these things very dynamically. And we will skip to something which is actually in another more extensively in another lesson, but we need it here for now. And that is the layout options. I was already telling what are layouts. Layouts are basically the parts. Here you can see I have the full score and I have the guitar, and I can change settings for them independently. Usually you change things like page size, etc. But if you go to players and, for example, you select the guitar, go to fretted instruments, I can say on this part, please show notation and tablature, or only show tablature. Let's choose this for a moment. And you can see, while in my full score, I still have this because maybe my conductor doesn't need to see the tablature. From a guitar player now, I can offer both. And as you maybe already have guessed, this is 100% functionally dynamic. Like I can change a pitch here, it will change the tablature. I can change something here, and it will also change the tablature. I can also do stuff like move this pitch. Sometimes you can play the same pitch on a different string, on the string below. And you can see here that now it changes to the 7th fret. And it still is a D, but you can play this D on different, I will make it a little louder, on different pitches, on different strings. Yeah. And you just have to go higher and higher. And remember, I was in the first lesson where I was showing you these different input methods. Well, this is now, since you're inputting actually with a guitar instrument, this is now actually updating as well. So you can see there's a blue dot showing where this string would be stopped. And if you want to enter music, you can actually also, let's go up here. enter it like this, that you just, if you're a guitarist, yeah, you can also enter it like this, and it will show you where you, oops, this green thing a little higher. So it will show you the pitches here and how they change. And so it actually, for example, if I delete this and enter it for a moment, when I enter it here, it remembers on which string it was. It was on the second string down there. And it remembers, and so it adjusts the fret here. So although the conductor, for example, sees A sharp A, the guitarist, if he chooses to have the tablature, sees 2, 3, and 12 on this string, which might be important for some technical aspects, timbre aspects, etc. Now remember how I said you can change these tunings here. Let's move it a little up and try to make sure we see everything. Mm, so as I said, I can change everything here and Dorico will account for it automatically. Since I wrote here in A, Dorico will try to remain in A. So if I, for example, change this tuning to a B and hit OK, then this will remain in A because it should sound like an A, but Dorico not changes this because it knows that the tuning of the pitch changed. And because the tuning of the pitch changed, you need to go to a different fret to have the same pitch. You can also, of course, as I said, change other things. You can delete the lowest string if you want. You can also add so if you do this, then we will just lose one of these strings. And you can also add the couple. Let's just do a full couple on the third fret, and now you will see all the numbers will actually change. And some of them have to be played actually somewhere else because you could not play these notes differently with this couple in this position. So while the music remains the same, Dorico is very smart and knows how to play this note on the guitar, each note. And you can see also the capo is now appearing here. And knows how it would need to be performed on the guitar, and thus can show you and adjust, for example, the whole um, tablature. Maybe you write in a key and you notice, oh, this whole thing is actually easier to play with a couple. Then you don't need to change the tablature. You just add the couple in the tuning, and in this way, the tablature will be automatically updated. So much to the guitar. Let's go to one more instrument, and you might probably guess that this all will work very similarly. Let's choose a drum set. And drums in Dorico are a collection of instruments. Now, I cannot enter with guitar anymore because it's not guitar, a stringed instrument, but I have the drum pads here. And this is something that also some people are used to working with. You can also, of course, have this MIDI keyboards, pads, and you can enter stuff like that. And I can literally just click here and, for example, create 4 kick drums. I can then go back and, for example, have a natural snare drum here. And I can also change to 8th notes, create my hi-hat like this. I can do the same if I, for example, just use my arrow keys. I can go through the different instruments, and I can also just with Z enter in this instrument. Yeah. So yeah, and I can basically do 100% the same. Z, Z. Yeah. I can also, of course, select these things, copy them, and Dorico remembers which instrument it was, and I can just repeat them. Not this, yeah. And in this way, yeah, I can write my drum groove. Now, as I said, Dorico thinks about these instruments on a drum um, as separate instruments, and I will put them together on the staff. This means that when I go in my drum set player and I have this drum set, it's green because it's what's called a percussion kit. I can also edit it. First, I can add more instruments here that I want. For example, I want the drummer to have a cowbell. Um, let's choose a high cowbell. And then I can actually tell it where should it be written. So you can see here, this is kind of the staff. It's a little hard to visualize, but maybe you can somehow see it. The hi-hat is here above this line. The kick is between these lines, and the snare drum is between these lines. The zero is basically the center line. And I can have my cowbell and can say, oh, I actually want you to be written, for example, higher than the hi-hat. I can choose however I want. I can also, for example, say, oh, actually, I want the hi-hat to be lower than it was before. And so if I hit apply, let's just make sure that we can see what happens. You can see that now the hi-hat actually moved lower. Again, I entered into instrument. Can also put the hi-hat all the way down if I want. This really is like not a problem. I can totally change it to the preferences of the player. I want to have it here. And so in this way, I can create, for example, a drum kit or other percussion kit, and I will show that in a moment, to the taste of whatever I like or what I think I need or what I think the player needs. So now I can go here and I have my cowbell. And actually, I have to change the grid. And I can, what do you want to, this? Yeah. Yeah. And for example, I have now this groove because I added a cowbell. Now you can see that here, this doesn't look nice because it kind of still wants to write an eighth for the hi-hat. So what you should kind of do is just turn it also into a 16th. Drummers usually kind of read the shortest note necessary. Yeah. What I can also do here is sometimes people want to have hands and feet separately. For example, the snare drum is not played with the feet, but with the hand. So you can also tell it actually use the up stem and not the down stem direction. And so would have to also shorten it, of course. The whole thing could look like this. Oh, that's correct. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is how you would, oops, it's wrong. This is how you could write it, for example. That's drums. Now I said that you can also have different representations for that because maybe you want to have how should I say? Okay, let's go back to what I showed you before that we have these layout options, and maybe the drummer wants to see it in a different way, or in the full score you want to see it in a different way. It makes sense in a moment when I give you a different example, But what you can do here, also in players, in percussion, you can actually choose how this instrument is being shown. Is it shown as a 5-line staff, what we have now? So this kind of usual pitch. You can also show it as a grid or single-line instruments. And we just look at each of these options. If I have a grid, and I go here to the drum set, you can see the same instrument is now kind of spread apart. If I go here in the 5-line, you can see this is how it looks like in the score. What I can also do is like single instruments. So I really have every instrument on a different line. And I can literally edit it here. For example, kick drum. And of course, as you already guessed, this will also be changed here. And so this is what I meant in the first time also, like you write something and it very dynamically can adjust. Now this in a drum set, this doesn't make so much sense. But for example, imagine you have, and it's kind of the last thing we will do. You have a player with a special kit. So it's not like a drum set, but you have like, they have like 3 instruments, for example. You can create here an empty kit. And you're basically in the same spot as was before, but it's totally empty. And you can add different instruments. For example, you can add a cymbal. Let's choose sorry, I'm blind. Just a suspended cymbal. Let's choose that. And you want to add a triangle, and you want to add a snare drum. Now you want, of course, to have them in different regions. Again, this can be totally to your taste. And in the score, maybe you want to have it like this, like just like this. But the player maybe wants to see it in a different way. And here you can see that we can change how it looks like in different presentations. So in the single lines, you can just say, I want the suspended symbol to be, no, I actually want the triangle to be on top. Yeah, because it's the highest pitch. In a grid, I want to also have it on top. But here I can also change, for example, the space low that is below. So I can say, for example, you can see I can make the gap very, very wide. And so here you can see this is now applied. Here's a huge gap. But again, if I go to the full score, to save space, I might want to actually show it as a 5-line staff. And I can enter a music here. Let's choose. No. 'Yeah, for example, like this. And while in my percussion part, it will look like this. Now, this gap is, of course, huge. It's just for demonstration. Yeah, but so much about the percussion notation. So you can really do also a lot. Usually you will probably use some presets, but it's good to know what's possible and how to adjust these things if you need to, because often if you're going into this kind of things, you will need to at some point. Okay. So much for today. Oh, this deadline is wrong. It should be wait. I need to check the calendar. Give me 1 second. 19th. Okay, so this was kind of the lesson part for today. We will do a short break in a moment, and then we will go to your homework. But for not in 2 weeks, but in 3 weeks, please start to choose a simple chamber music piece. Again, 18th to 20th century is the best. Short, not too fast, so there are not too many notes. 2 to 3 pages. So you're just getting used to entering notes from different instruments. Try to not only use string instruments, but also like wind instruments like in ligeti, or in also percussion like in L'Histoire du Soldat from Stravinsky. And please do that until the 19th of May. For next week, though, you are kind of doing the lessons because you will hold presentations. And so in these presentations, each of you can choose one of these families, for example, woodwinds, brass, orchestral, percussion instruments, keyboard instruments. Try to speak with each other so you don't choose the same. And please, in like a 10-minute presentation, present the characteristics of how we should notate these instruments. So you learn a little more about these different instruments and what are special things about them. For example, what is their ampetus? So from which note to which note can they play, and which clefs do they use? If you would use, for example, the woodwinds, you would have clarinet, bassoon, oboe, flute, maybe some saxophones, and maybe you would also show different clarinets. And so you would have to say the bassoon has the bass clef and it plays from this note to this note, etc. And also try to talk about how the sound is produced. So what is the mechanism? Is it like with the lips? Is it singing, of course? Is it with a reed? What are differences in the production? If there's any instrument-specific add-ons, brass instruments, for example, they have mutes, strings also have mutes, or other things that you can add on the guitar. There's a lot of things. Um, and also instrument-specific playing techniques, which is like somewhat similar. Um, for example, flutter tongue and the wind instruments, or flageolets in the string instruments, etc. All these things. Try to find sound examples. If you find them, that would be very helpful. So you will present this next Monday, and we will actually use both our slots for your presentations, so we will have enough time, and so you will not be stressed about the time. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, if you have any questions, you can always write to me. Then I would say we do a 5-minute break, and we'll be back at 21:09 for you, and we will go through your homework. And I will just log off quickly. I need to drink.